Hello, my name's Julie Williams. I'm a registered migration agent with Migration Downunder, and I'm here today to talk about the Resident Return Visa, subclass 155. What is the Resident Return Visa, you may ask? It's a visa that is connected and associated with your permanent residency grant. So when you are granted permanent residence in Australia, it is connected to the subclass 155 Resident Return Visa. And what that does, that allows you as a permanent resident to travel in and out of Australia and to remain a permanent resident as long as you continue living here in Australia. That resident return allows you to travel overseas as a resident, and if you do wish to return back to Australia, you must do so within 5 years of the validity of that resident return visa, because it's issued for 5 years. Because the whole intention of being granted permanent residence in Australia is because you have a desire to remain living here on a permanent basis here in Australia. But the government understands that circumstances change. You may get a job offer, you may have some family circumstances that you've got to travel overseas and you've got to live over there for a certain period of time. That's perfectly fine as long as you return before the 5-year expiry of that resident return visa. What happens if you don't? And how can you obtain that resident return visa to enable you to re-enter Australia as a permanent resident? Well, to continue to obtain that resident return visa, you've got to be living in Australia for a minimum of 2 out of the 5 years, not consecutively, accumulatively. So 5 years immediately prior to applying for a new resident return visa, you've got to show that you've lived in Australia for a minimum of 2 years. And sometimes people's circumstances change and they find that they haven't actually got those 2 years. Then what happens, the Department of Home Affairs will consider your circumstances, see that you've still got close personal or business ties to Australia, and will grant that resident return visa for 12 months instead of another 5 years. The reason being because they want to give you the ability to be able to return back to Australia and continue residing here as a permanent resident. So what the 12 months does just allows you to travel in and out. It doesn't mean that after 12 months your ability to remain in Australia is going to expire. If you're in Australia as a permanent resident, you can live here indefinitely. If you're not going to travel overseas, then you don't actually need to worry about the resident return visa. You can continue to remain here as a permanent resident. Although, if you have lived here for 4 years, then it's often best to obtain Australian citizenship. I appreciate and understand that not everyone wants to do that because not all countries recognise dual citizen, and there may be a reason why you don't want to relinquish or give up your original citizenship of birth, and that's completely understandable. So you can continue to reside in Australia as a permanent resident without having to renew that resident return. The only reason you require the resident return is so that you can travel overseas and return back in. We've had a lot of people travel outside of Australia and not realise that they haven't got a valid resident return visa, and they get caught. They're often notified or informed by customs at the time they depart, or they realise when they're going to re-enter Australia that their resident return visa has expired. So that's okay. If you've lived here for 2 out of the 5 years, you go online, you apply, and it's an auto grant. But it will affect your ability to obtain Australian citizenship. So if you do go overseas and your resident return visa has expired, or the resident return visa expires whilst you're offshore, and it might be only a couple of days, then to return back on a new resident return visa, because you've let it slip or lapse for at least, say, maybe 1 or 2 days, you then have to wait another 12 months before you can reapply or apply, I shouldn't say reapply, but apply for Australian citizenship. So the resident return visa is a visa that provides you with the facility to return back into Australia to allow you to continue residing as a permanent resident. Your permanent residence doesn't expire, it's just the facility to be able to re-enter as a permanent resident. And sometimes people do get unstuck if they decide to leave and live overseas for greater than 5 years. It becomes a lot more difficult to obtain that resident return visa, but thankfully we have helped a number of applicants be able to successfully reapply apply and gain that. And again, if you haven't lived for 2 out of the 5 years, you won't get another 5-year resident return. You may just get a 12-month resident return. But that then gives you the ability to make plans to return to Australia on a more permanent basis and resettle here in Australia as a permanent resident. But if you'd like to know more, I know there's a lot more to uncover and discover. And if you have got close personal or business ties, or your circumstances prevented you from returning to Australia within the validity of your resident return visa, then we're here to help and happy to assist you where required.